Live and in color from the NBC News radio broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful Southern California, and in parallel from the Turf's Up radio studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone show this evening.
Well, a pleasant afternoon and a pleasant evening and a pleasant morning, depending on where you are in this wonderful world, and I hope everybody's doing fine. Welcome to the Water Zone. I'm Rob Starr, along with Mr. Chris Davey, and we were anxious to do the show, and in other words, we were also sad to do the show because of what's happening in Los Angeles with all the fires and the devastation that's taking place, and it's hard to explain how you feel or how we feel, in the sense, I mean, we our hearts and minds and everything and prayers are out to all the people. I mean, it's like watching television and it's an apocalypse. It's just unbelievable to see what's happening. And I was talking to Chris earlier, both Chris's earlier, and we talked about what it could be like when you have nothing. Everything you own is gone, and maybe you didn't take clothes when you left, and you have only have your clothes on your back, and your cars are totaled. I mean, you're left with nothing, and what do you do? And it's really sad, and so we want to kind of dedicate the show to that and talk a little about some of the things we're hearing on the news, and lots of rumors going around. We don't know what's the truth or not the truth. Maybe Chris can give us a little bit about that. Mr. Davey lives in the Los Angeles area, and I know the air is bad at his place. The fire hasn't touched him yet, but Chris, how is it where you are?
Yeah, we're doing all right. Luckily, we are away from where the flames are, the active fire is, and so we are all of my neighbors, the city, the social media sites that I've been watching all day are very, very appreciative of that fact. However, the mood is somber. Everybody has a very fallen heart at thinking again about those who are in need. Physically around us, the air is acrid. That's about the best description. We're not in the thick smoke, but certainly the remnants of that fire are all over Southern California. And, you just go outside and it is almost enough to make you cry, Rob. So, again, all of our hearts, our thoughts, our prayers are with everybody who is in pain, who is suffering, and who has lost everything right now. But as you know, Rob, we decided maybe not even do a show today as we were talking earlier, but we're going to do one out of the fact that we need some normalcy and I just want to get back to things. And as you say, I live in the LA area. Chris Austin, who we'll bring on here in just seconds, has lived here before she moved up north. And so I'm sure you have similar feelings. Chris Austin, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. And my heart goes out to all my former 17 million neighbors of you down there that are having to deal with this. These really super high Santa Ana winds played a big deal. I actually read that they clocked gusts up to 84 miles an hour at Magic Mountain in Santa Clarita, which is where I used to live, and 100 miles an hour elsewhere. But how are the winds today there, Chris?
They're still blowing. They're still blowing. I mean, it's not like, as you were describing, at the peak of it, which was not last night, but the night before on Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning, they were just incredible here. I mean, it was actually moving, the house. We couldn't go to sleep, so I was sitting up against the headboard, which is against the wall, and when a gust came, you could feel the headboard move, the wall move. It was that bad. Just very very, very frightening.
Yeah, I can remember those winds when I lived out in Santa Clarita, and I can only imagine what that must have been like. It's been really rough. Fires keep breaking out, but they are managing to get some of these smaller ones tapped down before they become bigger ones. The fire that was behind Hollywood Boulevard last night they got down.
Yeah.
The winds have gotten to a point where they can use the helicopters and the other air attacks on these fires, and that's very useful. And just to sort of lead into the next phase of this, one of the things that they were able to get that fire in the Hollywood Hills down was because they could use helicopters, and they used water from the Hollywood Reservoir, which is very nearby, and which happened to be full. And that is part of some of, I guess, the frustration that I have, because this was one day when I really didn't like to have to do my job, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I felt like the truth was like being in a rowboat trying to go out to sea at high tide. It just didn't seem to be, and I'm not sure it's getting anywhere, but, there have been some comments by President-elect Trump and Elon Musk tying this into environmental regulations in the Delta Smelt. And this situation of the hydrants running dry has absolutely nothing to do with that. Absolutely nothing at all. What we have is an infrastructure issue in that, when they build out these water distribution systems to neighborhoods, the water district also has to provide for emergency fire flows. So they have to be able to route water to all of your faucets and toilets and showers in your house, and they also have to be able to route it to the hydrants in the case of an emergency. The system is really set up. I mean, how much you would use in a fire emergency is much greater than what you would use if you're supplying water to a house. So this is a very complex engineering job that they do to be able to provide these higher flows. But there's a limit to how much of those flows they can provide. And when you have they're really expecting what you would expect, maybe one house fire in a neighborhood at a time, one, maybe two. You're not expecting, all the firefighters fighting these fires to open up 10, 20 fire hydrants, however many they must have tried to open up. At the same time, we have homeowners understandably trying to protect their own property by turning on their garden hoses. And there was a lot of people trying to save their own properties. And I understand that feeling. When you're a homeowner, that's what you want to do, especially if you don't see help coming. But the very real thing is that also affects the whole amount of water that's available for the firefighters to do it. The system was not sized to have so much water demanding on it, and the LADWP says they were trying to put as much water as they could into the system, into the distribution tanks around town. They couldn't keep up with the demand. So it's not, it has nothing to do with Governor Newsom. It has nothing to do with, environmental regulations. And, now LADWP is coming under fire for, the hydrants going dry when the system was never designed for that, could never be designed for that. If you're an engineer, there are limits to things. So, that's the real issue here. It's a catastrophe.
Chris, when you're talking about this, you probably have more information than me. Can you describe for our listeners what they were talking about, the comments about the water restoration declaration? What is that supposed to do?
The thing is, there is no such document as a water restoration declaration or whatever. I think that Trump might have been referring to these biological opinions, which were recently released, finalized and released, but the governor has nothing to do with that. The governor does not sign that. That is the end of a permitting process. And the agency finished the permit and they released the permit, and that's what it is. There is not a water restoration declaration. I mean, I hate to say it, but I'll say it bluntly. He made that up.
Mm.
Nobody in California water knows what that means. There's a lot of things we don't know what it means. He talks about water coming down and dampening the forest. The forests aren't dry because we're using water for environmental purposes. They're dry because we're not getting precipitation and snow. And I don't know how we're going to dampen the forest with more water unless we're going to shoot the water up into the hills. I have no idea.
I was watching CNN, and they were talking about the underbrush on a lot of the hills and stuff that hasn't been cleared out, and that was supposed to be done. I turn on different channels to see different perspectives, and it's crazy. Whatever channel you turn to is different from the last one you watch.
Well, I will assume you've been to Southern California. Have you driven down like the 405 on the west side?
Yeah.
You look up at those hillsides, and there's houses up there, and there's roads on the bottom. No, I don't think they go out and clear out those hillsides. A lot of those hillsides are probably private property. There may be right of way for the freeway and stuff, but they're probably private property. And I think, it would be hard to be like in between these houses clearing out the brush. I'm not sure how that would practically work.
Yeah. I know when I lived in Orange County, the fire department would send things. The city would send us memos that it needs to be cleared X amount of feet from your property line going down a slope or a hill. And I think I mentioned this a couple of years ago on the show. They brought in, it surprised me, a herd of goats. Mm-hmm. and they were chewing up the stuff, and that's what they used to. A lot of people, or the city, hired them to clear that property. So I know Orange County, at least where I live, that was a mandatory thing that you had to have it cleared back. I forget how many feet, because I haven't lived there in a couple of years, but.
And I think that in the newer neighborhoods and places where things grew that made sense, that with some planning. But when you look at Los Angeles, which grew a lot in 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, post-war, the housing is just kind of put in places, and there's a lot of unmaintained area in between. And think about those canyons, like Beverly Canyon. How would you get in there and clean up that brush?
All the canyons, Malibu Canyon, Topanga Canyon, all of those places are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not. Yeah, I don't think it's environmental regulations. I think it's just not practical. To do it. So.
I guess I would tell our listeners, if you would, it's up to each and every one of you who's listening, donate some money to the Red Cross or to a church or something to help these people. Because, you're talking, I heard today almost 20,000 buildings have been affected. I'm sure that's commercial and homes, but even if it was half of that, 10,000 homes, these people need help. And as we were talking earlier before the show, the insurance company is going to take a hit. As you said,
a lot of the Pacific Palisades is getting a lot of the attention, and that is the where the more wealthy people live. But Altadena is a regular working class sort of community. So,
right.
But even if you have a lot of money, if you lost your house, that sucks. And if you had a lot of money, you have a lot less now.
Yes.
But you still lost everything. And this I just think that people need help at this point, and we should just help them.
Yes, I agree. So, again, listeners, if you have a favorite charity or the Red Cross or any of those things.
Lost their homes.
Yeah, please help.
Yeah, the Red
donate.
Cross, definitely.
So, anyway, I'm just as sad as everybody else today. It's just tear. I watch it and I start tearing up. It's I can't imagine something like that happening, but it does, and and then when it hits you, it's frightening. So
yeah, so I hope everyone out there in Southern California stays safe.
yeah. Well, we're gonna leave that and take a break on that sad note. And Chris, thank you for coming on today, and as you do every week. And Chris Davey, I hope you're not breathing in that nasty air, because you think about all the paint from houses or buildings or all the chemicals and plastic that's now in the air. It's bad for you to breathe. So take care of yourself. So we're gonna take a little break and come right back with a special guest. But Chris Austin, thank you very much. And for our listeners, please go to mavensnotebook.com, become a subscriber. You'll love that. And if you really like it, like we do, become a sponsor of the show. That would be really welcomed to that. That's the best place that Chris Davey and I get our water news from. So, Chris Austin, thank you very much, and hope we all feel a little better in the coming days.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Stay safe.
Have a great week, Chris.
All right, we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back with our special guest. He's a scientist and a professor at a university, and he's got a pretty interesting topic about water, a different phase of water that you may never heard of. So stick around. We'll be right back.
One of the most time-saving tools I found for my customers is our app and our e-commerce feature. So customers actually have the ability to view all of their quotes in one place. If you contact your Site One seller, you'll be able to log into your account and see all your quotes in one place. And instead of jumping on the phone or waiting for your seller to call you back, you can approve it right from the website, and it will send a message to your sales rep to get it on order and reserve the material. Customers can learn more about these tools at their Site One branch, from their local seller, from their local CX specialist, and from SiteOne.com, or by downloading the Site One app.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Water Zone radio show and podcast, and thanks for sticking around with us, or if you're just tuning in, thanks for that as well. I'm your host, Chris Davey, along with the ever-present Rob Starr, and we sure do appreciate this opportunity to share this time with you. Our guest today is Dr. Gerald Pollack, and he's here today to talk about his most recent book titled The Fourth Phase of Water, a compelling title as it reads right there. Dr. Pollack is a faculty member and a professor at the University of Washington and a founding editor-in-chief of the scientific journal Water, WATER. He's also recognized as an international leader in science and engineering, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Pollack to the Water Zone.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You're absolutely welcome, right? So maybe you can give our listeners a little bit more background. I know my introduction to you and your bio was brief. I've read your bio, and we could take up a good amount of time reading through it. But if you can kind of give us the 30,000-foot view, what's a little more detail about your background?
I started in electrical engineering, and as an undergraduate, and I thought I would never do anything electrical again. I started studying muscles and how muscles contract. That was the beginning of my career. Well, it occupied a good portion of my career, 2 or 3 decades. And we came to the conclusion, based on a lot of evidence, that the prevailing view of muscle contraction was wrong. And I learned a lot about scientific society doing that. I learned that that new ideas are not as welcome as we might anticipate. They ought to be. And yet, whenever I present the material on muscle, audiences, not the people who are in the muscle field, but audiences really react positively to it, because I think the evidence is clear that the prevailing view is not right, despite the fact that it was brought forth by a famous Nobel laureate, Sir Andrew Huxley. I learned from that it really counts who you are and who you come from, rather than what you do. Anyway, that interested me for many years, and I think we made a lot of progress. And then I went to a conference once, and I was exposed to the ideas of Gilbert Ling. Gilbert Ling came from China. He was in the first cohort that was chosen throughout China to come to the U.S. To begin their career, promising young scientists. And of the four, three won Nobel Prizes, and Gilbert Ling should have won at least 2 Nobel Prizes for his contributions. I was simply mesmerized. He was talking about water inside the cell, and his argument was that it's not liquid water that's inside the cell, but it's a kind of water where the individual molecules of water were stacked, organized like soldiers at attention. And he considered them to be, each water molecule to be a dipole, being with plus at one end, minus at the other end. And you can imagine how those dipoles would stack upon one another. And that was his idea. It was supported by many people who were at the conference where I met him. So I was mesmerized, and maybe easily mesmerized. So I didn't trust myself. So I gave one of his books. By that time, he'd written 3 or 4 of them. Gave one of his books to some of my students and asked for their feedback. And their feedback was uniform. They said, if this guy is right, all of biology is wrong, because all of biology is built on the idea that the cell is filled with water, kind of an aqueous solution, just like a glass of water. And he's saying, no, it's not like that. And so they said, if he's right, it's a revolution. And I think he's right, because there's so much evidence to support his points of view. So first thing I did was to write a book, because Gilbert Ling has a habit writing for people as brilliant as he is, but not for the rest of us. So if you really want to penetrate what he's saying, it's necessary to spend a lot of time educating yourself. And what I wanted to do, because his ideas seemed so attractive to me, I wanted to expose his ideas in a way that people could understand it. And I did. It was called Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life, 2001. And I think the book received mixed reviews. Some reviewers said, oh, well, this is more of Gilbert Ling, and everybody knows that Gilbert Ling is a crackpot, so pay no attention to this book. And I think that inspired a lot of readers to come read. So, and I think it was from the other side, there was some cell biologist, a famous cell biologist from Harvard, who wrote, and if it's from Harvard, you have to pay attention to it, who wrote, this is a 304-page preface to the future of cell biology. I like that one better. Anyway, we finally got a little bit of funding, and we turned our attention to water, because I had interest in pursuing Gilbert Ling's idea, maybe adding something to it. Well, it turned out we added a lot to it, and it turned out, based on the results that we obtained, that conceptually Gilbert Ling was right. The water is in the cell differs from ordinary liquid water. But we found out that the water was different from what Gilbert Ling had been suggesting. It turned out a lot of interesting things. It turned out that when water met a surface, a so-called hydrophilic surface, that is a water-loving surface, the water molecules underwent a profound change, and that kind of change was sort of expected, because if you have water, as Gilbert Ling was suggesting, if you have water in which the components or molecules are organized, what you have is a crystal or a liquid crystal, and these crystals, many of them are pure, and if they're pure, it means that It means that any contaminants that had been in the water to start with get expelled. And we found exactly that's what happened next to hydrophilic surfaces. A very large region by molecular standards, could be up to a millimeter, was that zone that we observed where the particles that we had exposed to were pushed out. So it's kind of blank zone, just some kind of water. And we investigated that some kind of water, and we found some astonishing results. First of all, that water, which we call exclusion zone, or EZ, easy to remember, and later we call it fourth phase water, because every feature of that water that we measured differed from liquid water. So it was certainly not liquid water. So we were able to confirm, as Gilbert Ling had predicted, a zone which is kind of like the liquid crystal. But what we found subsequent to that was maybe even more interesting. We found that typically that zone was not neutral. It starts from water molecules, which are neutral, and those molecules get transformed, and they didn't get transformed. They didn't get transformed to something neutral. They got transformed to what typically had negative charge. So you start with water, and after a few minutes, that zone, the exclusion zone, grows and bears negative charge. So the question arose, if one zone is negatively charged, where are the corresponding positive charges? Because the two have to add up to zero, because you started with zero, no net charge with ordinary liquid water. And we found that zone was just beyond the exclusion zone. So you've got a hydrophilic surface, and next to that hydrophilic surface is this fourth phase or exclusion zone, typically negatively charged, and the next region beyond was positively charged, just like the first step of photosynthesis. Well, if you think about negative charge separated from positive charge, that's a battery. So if we're right, and I believe we're right, then water undergoes some change, making it battery-like, and batteries supply energy. And we found that this kind of energy is used by the cell. So everybody who's studied biology knows that the energy for all the work that we do, for jogging or running or simply standing up, it comes from ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is supposed to have a high energy phosphate. And we're suggesting from our experiment that it's not only ATP that supplies energy, but it's water that supplies energy because of the battery-like existence. Now, just one other thing I would add to this, because I know you got other questions. The ATP idea has been challenged by several groups. It was found in 1941 by a guy named Lippincott that ATP had a high energy phosphate bond which could deliver energy for biology. And since then, that's like 85 years, pretty much everybody has thought that that's where the energy comes from. But what people don't recognize is that there have been challenges to this by several different groups who said either that they screwed up, they made an arithmetic error, or simply testing this phosphate and comparing it with other phosphates, and everything is exactly the same. So we don't know for sure who's right. Was it the original guy, Lippincott, or was it the doubters? And for some reason, I guess I could expound on that. Nobody studied this. I mean, nobody seriously raised the question, do we really know whether ATP is responsible? Since, there have been challenges to it. So we don't know whether the original finding is right or the challenges are right. And in my view, this is desperately needed in our day because, we found another source, an electrical source. And right now, we don't know whether this electrical source of energy, whether it complements ATP or it works instead of ATP, in lieu of ATP. So it may be it's possible. We don't know yet. I'm speculating. It's possible that much or all of our energy comes from electrical sources, not chemical sources. So now, just one more thing is you can't get energy from nothing. You can't create energy. You can't destroy energy. You can only convert one kind of energy to another kind of energy. And so, if what I was telling you about this battery that exists to deliver energy, there must be something to charge the battery. Your cell phone, if you forget to plug it in, you wake up in the morning and you got no cell phone to use. So batteries require charging or recharging. And we couldn't figure out where on Earth the source of energy could come in and build this battery. Finally, it was a young undergraduate student, who was working in a simple chamber in a laboratory in which he could see the exclusion zone. And he grabbed a lamp that was sitting next to him. And I don't know whether he grabbed it because he was bored or because he was curious. I'm not sure. He shined the lamp onto the chamber, and the region that was illuminated, the exclusion zone, grew enormously. So we did follow-up experiments, of course, and we found that the wavelength of light that was responsible for building up this battery is infrared light, not visible light, not the other wavelengths, but this kind of light, infrared light. So we now know the sort of sequence of things. Infrared light, when water is next to a hydrophilic surface, which most surfaces are hydrophilic, and you got this energy coming in, then the water converts itself to easy water, to a battery-like water that can deliver energy. So that's kind of the major part of the finding. There are many other findings, but I just wanted to acquaint you and your listeners or viewers to the essence.
Your work is amazing, and what you talked about is amazing to me. I mean, I thrive for that stuff. Chris will tell you, I'm a hardcore techie, and I love this. I love discussing stuff like this, and have somebody of your caliber that we can talk to. What do you see as implications for the water sector, such as farming, for ag and turf, with this new thing?
Well,
and one of the things that I would tell students that I taught in front, you can't walk on water if you don't get out of the boat. And I really believe that when you think you've done all the answers or all the questions you can, there's still more you haven't done yet. And but it takes somebody with tenacity, like you and the people that you work with. And I love that. That to me is the science of that more than anything in my life. I love that stuff. And
well, I got to say that I agree with you 100%. I'll get to ag in a second, but let me just say that that's what science is all about, penetrating toward ground truth. But the
right.
system, the granting system has set up now, essentially doesn't allow you to do that because, let's say, I'll give you an example of why it doesn't work. And please remind me to get back to the ag because I want to talk about that. Yeah, okay. I have a tendency to go off up the tree on some limbs and never return. So
I do that. Chris will tell you that all the time. I do the same thing.
Well, okay. So we're the same. But the way the granting system works. So let's suppose that the whole world thinks that the Earth is flat. And if I look behind you, I can see water, and it looks flat to me. So, I can imagine how most. But you, always interested in finding ground truth, you have some evidence that no, it's not flat. You've seen satellite photos, you've seen photos from the moon, and the Earth looks like it's round. And you've also taken off, flew westward, wind up San Francisco, and keep going west to Tokyo, and then to London and New York and wherever you wind up exactly the same place you started. So it's kind of an additional so-called preliminary evidence that the Earth is really round. It's not flat the way everybody else thinks. And you decide, because this is really important, you decide that you want to study it in a formal way. So you put together an application for money, a grant application, and you submit it to either the National Science Foundation or National Institute of Health, or one of these large organizations. And the gatekeeper receives it and looks, and he says, well, this is pretty, if true, this is earth-shaking. This is amazing, so being diligent, the gatekeeper says, well, I have to find out whether this guy is a crackpot or whether he's got something interesting to say, right? And so what does he do? Being conscientious, he hires the experts, the world's experts in the shape of the Earth, to review your application to see whether you're, as I said, crackpot or serious. So who are the experts on the shape of the Earth? They're all flat Earth people, the leaders of the Flat Earth Society. And you're proposing round Earth, and you get reviewed by a flat Earth person who has an ego, doesn't want to be displaced. So you can imagine the outcome. You're not going to be reviewed in a favorable way. It's just human nature. It's not anything more than that. So it makes it difficult for someone who has a revolutionary idea to make headway, because in order to make headway, you need funding to hire the people to do the work and to get supplies and equipment. And it's a real challenge if you have an idea that runs against the mainstream. It's a real challenge to get the money. Okay, anyway, I just wanted to make that statement. Now for ag.
Well, I have a brain teaser here for you that I would throw back at those people. You ask them, where can you find an ocean that has no water?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. And I think in my a few forthcoming books, I'm going to demonstrate that that's the case. And especially, maybe I'm not ready to talk about here, but I think volcanoes and earthquakes, water is central to all of those. And I've drafted a book. It's waiting in line next to a couple of other books, waiting for my artist, who's my son, who's extremely talented, but also does his home remodeling. He's the contractor, general contractor himself.
Does he give you a cost reduction on his services?
I pay him so little because we publish all our books. It's what you would call self-published, and the reason is not because other publishers reject it; they're seriously interested, but because we like to be able to present it in the way that we like to present it,
Absolutely.
Not the way the publisher wants to. And the publisher will probably sell it for $150 because that's what academic books commonly go for. And we sell The Fourth Phase of Water, which is extremely popular on Amazon. We sell it, I think, for $27 because the interest is in dissemination, not in profit. We make no profit. As a result, the salary that I pay my son is limited. So anyway, he's my son. He's good-natured. So, okay. So now agriculture. Our focus has been mostly on humans and animals. But the same principles apply in agriculture. The plants are built of cells, and presumably the cells work in much the same way as your cells and my cells. So if, for example, some expedient works really well for humans, there's a good chance, not necessarily so, that it works well in agriculture too. And I'm thinking mostly of the soil because plants need easy water, just the way you and I need easy water to function. If our cells are filled with easy water, they can do what they need to do. If they're deficient in easy water, they can't do it as well. So, and many of our cells, we all have medical issues and such, many of our cells don't have enough easy water, and so they're deficient in functioning. And if you want to improve function or reverse pathology, even you try to build easy water. And there are at least a half dozen simple expedients to building easy water, and one of them, well, there are actually quite a few of them. So I'm thinking about the soil and what you can do to amend the soil to prompt more vigorous growth. And I just came across the one that really intrigued me. There are others, but what really intrigued me is putting electrodes. This is a paper that just came out a couple of days ago, and putting electrodes in the soil and passing current. And they report that the yield is like 50% greater in that case. And what they're doing, I think, is they're building easy water, because we found that another way of building easy water, you can just take ordinary liquid water and put electrodes in, and next to the negative electrode, which passes electrons into the water, that water transforms itself into easy water. Just pass current or put electrons in the water, and liquid water turns into easy water. So I think the same thing may be happening in that paper that I just mentioned to you. You pass current through, and you get better yield. It's actually to shift for a moment, to shift to the issue of cancer, for example. So cancer is a pathology that unfortunately many of us will suffer or have suffered, whatever, and family members. And it turns out that there's a guy of some distinction that determined that if you pass current in the tumor goes away, just like the water that the soil that I was just talking about. And this guy was head of the Nobel Commission. So I mean, he's a scientist of some distinction, but he didn't like to write usual publications. He wrote notes and such, and a lot of people thought he was crazy. Can't be, but yet you guess that a guy who's head of the committee to choose Nobel prizes, might have some head on his shoulders. So I wanted to bring this out because the idea is principles that apply in the body almost certainly apply in the soil. And also, when you think of plants, when you think of our health, one of the touted approaches to keeping our health going and improving our health is to do so-called juicing. About it. So you go in the backyard, you take freshly grown plants, pull off the leaves, squeeze them to death, squeeze out the water. So what are you squeezing out? Well, you're squeezing out the water from inside the plant cells. And that water in the healthy plant cell should be filled with easy water, with fourth phase water, and then you drink it. So what you're doing is transferring the easy water from the plant to you. And it's been, I don't know how much is reported, but I've heard from various health practitioners that it's like the best thing that you can do for your health, no matter what problems you might have. So,
well, a lot of people always ask me questions like, why do they have Christmas tree farms underneath electrical wires? And you know the answer to that. And most
I know what the answer might be, but
no, it generates something that helps the plants grow.
Well, I would think
more direct is the electrodes directly into the soil.
Oh yeah, into the soil or into the water, pretty much the same thing. Yeah, so some of the principles that have evolved mainly in the direction of animals also apply to plants and also apply to soil. So anything you can do in the soil to build easy water will be helpful for the health for agro. Whatever you're growing will grow better. Does that answer your question on that?
Yes, sir. Chris, jump on in and ask some more questions.
Well, so Dr. Pollack, you've talked a little bit about what the benefits for society are, implications to public health, and a little bit about the environment as well. Is there anything that you see developing for climate issues, right? Like drought and water scarcity anywhere. Any benefits or throughput that we can follow through on that idea?
Well, yeah, for two things I'd mention for clean water scarcity. We developed a filtration device. We call it a filterless filter because there's no physical filter. The water, input water, which may contain contaminants, the water gets divided into easy water and ordinary water. And the easy water, as I mentioned earlier, excludes pretty much all junk. So you dump it and you collect the easy water fraction, and that is essentially clean water devoid of these contaminants. So we've made quite a bit of progress on that, and I think there's a future for it. There's a lot that needs to be done, and would like to do it. We had a startup company because this is kind of more appropriate for a company than for a university laboratory, and we were going gangbusters really well, except two people on the board couldn't get along with one another, and that was the end of our startup company. So, you know how that goes. Yeah. So, but we think this may have a future, and it may be possible to separate salt from water. If you think of salt as a contaminant, you put ocean water in, separate the salt, and collect the salt-free water. And that one we're not as confident of it because we just started looking into it, but it's certainly a possibility. And finally, getting energy for the world, electrical energy. So I mentioned you have negative zone, positive zone. You have a battery. You can put electrodes in the battery and get current out enough to light an LED bulb, LED light source. And so we have proof of principle. This actually works. And as I said, the energy is infrared energy, which is always around us. So it's possible just from water and the infrared energy that's always there, we can get electrical energy. Now, of course, we're interested in scale up. We haven't started, and we don't know if it's going to work or not work, but this is a real possibility of scaling this up to power a city, for example. So yes, there are practical outcomes of this if one thinks that the scientific understanding is not practical enough.
If we can take a few minutes and just kind of, put your searchlight on, Jerry, right? Direct it into the future, looking ahead, taking a forward-looking view. Do you see anything real exciting on the horizon? I mean, not just the work that you're doing, but what others of your colleagues might be working on. Give us a kind of a forward-looking view of where you see things going.
Well, I guess there are two aspects. One is our stuff, and the other is other people's stuff. And our stuff is about as fundamental as it gets. If we're right, because it's said that even the most beautiful of theories can be ruined by one ugly fact. And so, we never know exactly. That may happen, but if what we found is true, it's about as fundamental for life as it gets. So it has a big future. For other people, well, this is not the greatest time for science in the world. There are not many people dealing with scientific revolutions. And we need scientific revolutions to eventually create the technologies which eventually solve our problems. But because of the way the grant system is set up, I gave you the example, before of a flat Earth versus round Earth. This is pervasive throughout science. It's always the experts who make decision, and if you're challenging the experts, you won't get money, and therefore canny scientists know that they better avoid suggesting anything radical. And what that means is we don't have scientific revolutions. If I were to challenge you, I bet you could not name one that's occurred in the last 50 years. I mean, genuine science, not technological revolutions or not something built on old revolutions. So science needs to change, and I think we're on the threshold. We do have an organization, the Institute for Venture Science, which is trying to push this change, and I hope we're successful. People are beginning to pay attention.
Maybe we should move away from the experts and go to people with common sense.
Well, we go to people who have proven scientific backgrounds and expertise, but not directly in the field of the shape of the Earth, for example.
No, but there's lots of ego involved in all of that.
Well,
I'm sure
ego is all over the place, and ego is exactly what's killing it, because the way the system is set up to work inadvertently, it tends to support or bolster the ego of scientists who have, quote, made it, unquote, not the challengers. So for scientific revolutions, we need challengers.
Well, where can people find out more about you and get your book? Where is it available?
Amazon is the best place. The Fourth Phase of Water. There is another book coming soon, but it's going to be a few months. But the Fourth Phase of Water is the one that is, it's really popular. It's extremely popular. And I think maybe the popularity is born out of the fantastic artwork of my son rather than the verbiage from me.
Well, I'm definitely going to go buy one this week, so I appreciate that.
You'll find it pretty inexpensive.
It's what's inside it that's important to me. I know Chris and I were talking a couple of weeks ago about having you on the show, and I could listen to you for hours. I mean, I'm too old to go back to school, but I would enjoy reading your information. So, Chris,
well, you're very kind. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Chris,
appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Dr. Gerald Pollack, great having you on. Insightful viewpoints, lots of great discussion there, and a lot more to talk about. So when that other book comes out, Jerry, if you hear a knock on your door via email, it might be Rob and I asking you for to come back and do another segment with us, and we'd love to have you.
Sure. Wait about 3 months.
great.
Yep,
Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
All
Okay,
right.
guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate your wonderful questions, and it's been a pleasure.
Well, that was pretty good, Chris.
It was actually fantastic, Rob. I tell you, man, there's for the listeners who weren't able to be on the pre-conversations for this segment, Dr. Pollack had a ton more to talk about. I mean, all the stuff about other parts of the water sector. We talked a little bit about farming, right? Ag, right? But all the stuff that he talked about for commercial water utilities, water treatment, wastewater, produced water. I mean, this is like in every circle.
Yeah. It fascinated me with the medical portion. And stimulating the grounds and stuff. And I got to believe that, there's more that we don't know as science moves. I mean, it used to be every 20, 30 years something new would show up, but now it's like every 6 months.
Yeah.
And he's right about writing an engineering dissertation and an application for a grant. And if the guy who's reviewing it doesn't believe or doesn't, have the same view as you do, they'll turn you down. That's kind of a shame because you never know.
Absolutely.
Somebody's smart enough to. So those things are amazing to me. Well, again, to our listeners, thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate it. And again, as we said earlier, we have our prayers for the families and people who were involved in the fires in Los Angeles. We suggest you donate some money if you can, $1, whatever you got, to help the people who actually have nothing left anymore in their life. And it's kind of a shame, but we wish them well and hope God takes care of them. So, Chris, any other parting words?
No, same note here, buddy. Everybody just be generous as you can.
Yeah. And the one thing that Chris and I always tell you every single week is the following. Please help keep our planet blue. Because if you like green, you got to have blue. All right, thanks a lot. So we'll talk to you next week. Hope the world improves and better things happen. And we'll catch you on the back end.
NBC News on KCAA Loma.